Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Brands and Banter. Today, I am so excited to sit down with President and CEO of Hot Head Burritos, Kelly Gray. Kelly, welcome.
Hi, Joanna. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
It's going to be fun. So, I really want to kick it off. You have such a fascinating origin story of, how you got here today, especially your route to Hot Head Burritos. So, let's jump in. You were the realtor on the very first Hot Head Burritos location, weren't you?
Yeah, so the very first hothead started in one of the locations I represented as an agent, and my business partner, Ray Wiley, who has just recently passed away. So this is my first interview as president and CEO. But Ray operated a Subway in that location, and he said he told the landlord he wanted to try this new brand called Hot Head Burritos. And the landlord said he was going to give him a 1-year lease, and if it worked, he'd renew for 5. And I said to the landlord, now people who only want a 1-year lease are not serious. Why are we doing this? He said, Kelly, we're going to do this. And that was in 2007. And 2017, I bought into the brand. So it worked.
Yeah, I guess that 1-year lease really worked out then. That's so like such a fun and fascinating entry point too into the brand, just to be on the other side of it, and just to like hear how it kind of came about and moved into the location there in 2007. So that's awesome.
Yes.
So a lot of restaurant founders, owners come up through kitchens. What you came up through the commercial real estate industry. What did that background make you see differently, maybe from day one, or different perspectives it maybe gave to you?
So I never worked in a restaurant as a kid because I thought, oh my gosh, that's too hard to work. I don't want to do that. But I was always, always worked, always in business. Was in the financial securities business for a while, so understood financials, well, then got into commercial real estate and just really gravitated towards restaurants because I thought it was just so exciting and so changing. I love to watch brands grow. So it really gave me a great perspective on that side of the world, and also from, doing deals with really all of my personal competitors now and big brands, McDonald's, Burger King's, Starbucks, everybody. I understood how they did deals, how their leases were structured, what kind of concessions a landlord would give or would not give. And so at least gave me bargaining power. And I also had worked with both tenants and landlords. So again, seeing both sides of it and really seeing the financials of the deal on each side and what would make the most sense and how do you really get a win-win, as cliche as that sounds, for both parties, because that's really what makes a good relationship with your landlord or with your tenant is, everybody winning, everybody making money, because that's what we're all here to do.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think it's definitely a unique perspective for people now, like that maybe are sitting in the president and CEO role. So I think that experience, I'm sure, is like invaluable to you just to have the other side of the coin. And you clearly have a lot of restaurant knowledge too. So understanding, maybe what other brands might be doing and considering, I can only imagine helps a lot.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, you've said your real estate background made you better at negotiating leases, but also more honest about whether a brand has enough capital to succeed. How does that show up in practice?
Yeah, really, a lot of growth in the restaurant business is franchisee driven. So, on when I was wearing my realtor hat, especially as I was just really getting into restaurant ownership with Hot Head Burritos, and previous brand I'd started with my partners, Rapid Fire Pizza. I really started to understand how much money it took to do this, and you have to have both cash and financing available to get it off, to get it launched. And a lot of the franchisees may have the minimums that a franchisor would require, but you really have to have a good bit of working capital to keep it going. And I think the biggest thing is not trying to cheat your marketing budget, because that is one of the most important things. As an operator now, and as a realtor, I saw the number of people who would, do these big grand openings and then stop marketing. But just because you're living it every day doesn't mean that your customers remember that you're there. I mean, Hot Head started in the Dayton, Ohio area again, in 2007, next year will be our 20-year anniversary, and people will still say, Hot Head Burritos, what is that? I've never heard of it. Are you living under a rock? Because we
Yeah.
do advertise a lot, but people, just either don't pay attention, or maybe you're just not hitting them in the advertising lane that they're listening to.
Yeah, and I think it's what it comes down to is there's so much being thrown at people on an everyday basis that it's finding out like, what messaging and what is really going to stick for them. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed and it's like, okay, how can you meet them, really meet your consumer where they're at and understanding like what kind of message they need to hear in order to have it resonate. So I can imagine too. That's so exciting though that you're coming up on 20 years. You were saying 2007 and I'm like, oh yeah, like 10 years old. I'm like, wait, it is 2026. I had to
Amazing.
think.
It's just so crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
20 years is huge. That's very exciting. I hope you have some fun plans for 20
We
years
do.
of
We're
Hot
going to
Head.
do a whole like little retro logo. Sometimes when our, members of our team who have been with us for a long time, because we have people who have been with us, almost from the beginning or really from the beginning, and they'll
Yeah.
wear like one of their retro T-shirts. We're like, oh my God, that's so cool. Where'd you get that at? And because brands evolve, but I've noticed that. Actually I stopped into a McDonald's and I noticed them wearing these retro T-shirts, and I'm like, oh, retro is cool again.
Yeah, retro is definitely cool again. I couldn't agree more. I love that. That's a fun idea. I'll have to be on the lookout for all of the things 20 years Hot Head Burritos next year. What's a conversation maybe due to your background in real estate that you find yourself having with franchisees that you think maybe typical brand presidents aren't having?
I think because of my real estate experience and my restaurant experience, I'm really having two conversations with my franchisees in that lane. Is one regarding how much the rent is, and two, the location. I get a lot of franchisees, and I'm sure every brand does, that are so excited they want to get a store open, and they will take a substandard location, which it's such a huge investment that, I always tell people, don't worry about a dollar or two a square foot. Don't go off the beaten path to get that discount. But on the flip side, new real estate is so expensive right now. I get a lot of great sites that come across my desk, and they want $40 or $50 a square foot to rent. I'm like, we can't afford that. I mean, if you're at Chick-fil-A, they can afford that, but we can't afford that. So just kind of keeping in perspective what is financially reasonable to pay in rent, and really being patient to get that right location. And a lot of times it's turning over rocks to get that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're looking or evaluating a new market, what does that evaluation process look like? I know obviously cost per square foot, I'm sure is a huge factor in that, but maybe what are some other brands like potentially, I hate to say like getting wrong, or what like knowledge have you been able to bring in finding that new location and that evaluation process?
Yeah, so as we're looking at a new market, there's a lot of factors that we're looking at. One is there available real estate? To our competitors there already, and if not, if I choose a location, can they outposition me? But the other thing, that when we look at something is obviously everyone's looking for population and traffic count. So we definitely look at those things. But one factor that I think has really, I've really learned over the years, especially being on the restaurant side, not the real estate side, is when I'm looking at demographics for like daytime population. If I have a heavy daytime population of where there's hospitals or universities, a lot of times those people cannot leave their location to go out for lunch. So I discount those when I'm looking at them, just because, yes, in a hospital, some doctor's offices can leave, but most of your staff can't. Now, in today's day and age with third-party delivery and catering, I really have to think that's how I have to really focus my marketing dollars in somewhere like that. But I also, we look at the cost of advertising when we're going into a market. So, for example, being based in Ohio, Columbus, which is one of the areas everybody wants to be in. Well, the advertising expenses are so high because of the Ohio State University, and they use so much of the marketing space out there that it cost us a lot to do it. So we really have to be conscientious of, can I get enough stores in there quickly in order to be able to get enough of the market share and afford to have marketing? And we like big small towns too, because they tend not to have as many new competitors coming in, and people are excited when you're there, and we like to be involved in the community doing fundraisers for the schools and those kind of things. So being a partner, I think, really helps.
Yeah, no, I think I like the way you put that, big small towns where, there's enough people there to really buy into the brand, and obviously a great loyal consumer base there. But I love the idea of really getting involved with your community, those school fundraisers. I think that's so impactful too, and it just continues to tie back the loyalty into the brand. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Sometimes with
Um,
those big small towns, you can't necessarily do more than one store, but if you positioned yourself right as a franchisee, I always want my franchisees to do more than one store, and then you can kind of pick and choose, and so they're not geographically too far away from their home base either. That's important, and I always talk to my potential franchisees about, okay, here, if we do store number one here, where are we going to do store number two and store number three?
yeah, no, that's fair. That's such an interesting point you brought up too. A thread I'd like to pull on the third-party delivery apps is I never realized the complexity now that you probably have to consider when you used to say you discount by a doctor's office or a hospital, but now you're like, oh, actually that might unlock something new that I'm sure is a whole extra layer of things to consider. So that's so interesting. I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah, it was. We were very lucky, but before COVID started, we were already signed up with the third party services. So we didn't have to get in line. We were already there. So that's interesting. And we also, it's changed the way we're designing our stores because so many people are utilizing third party. They're not, we have a 90% off premises right now. So I don't need as big a store, but I need to think about where am I putting all of those third party delivery pickup, or, for my stores that have drive throughs or pickup windows, where am I going to store all that product, waiting for the customer to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. That actually kind of folds perfectly into our next section here about designing for efficiency, whether it's a corporate store or franchisee standards. So you've described your job as a franchisor as designing the most efficient operations possible for your franchisees. What does that actually look like day to day, and how did you get there?
Honestly, there's so much involved with that, and luckily, I have a great team. Like I said, I never worked in a restaurant as a kid, but the few times that I do go in and I look at the way our restaurants are laid out, I always have questions like, why are we doing it like this? Why isn't it more efficient? But again, my team is so great, and sometimes I'll give ideas, and they're like, "Nope, Kelly, we can't do that because it takes 3 more steps for the employee to do this, to get to that point, or go around this piece of equipment or whatever." And you just really have to think through all of those things. Again, I want as small as real estate space as I can, which keeps the cost down for my franchisees. But I also want a workspace that's comfortable for the employees, because that will affect employee happiness and turnover. In fact, we're right in the middle of remodeling the very first store in that shopping center that I was the leasing agent on, because when we built it, it was all just too. We gave tons of room for the dining room, but it made the kitchen area really small, and the employees are just cramped in there. They can barely 2 people pass each other. So we're in the middle of opening that up, and our employees are just thrilled as we're doing it, because they're like, oh, it's going to be so much better to work here. And of course, the customers are interested in seeing it happen, but I'm still going to probably end up with 40 seats, and that's still way
Yeah.
more than I need. But it really is changing the way we're looking at things. And in fact, I was over there today looking at the store. I'm like, oh, okay, well, we have a big tall can rack. Well, we're gonna take that out, put a smaller can rack in with a tabletop workstation, so that way I have more prep space, workspace, because we always need more. You just never have enough table space. We're trying to just be really efficient in the way we're building things, so that way, we're not wasting, any square inch in the space.
Yeah, that's such a perfect segue too, because I was going to talk about. I know that when we first chatted, you were talking about how can something have two different functions. You know, whether that's a can rack with a worktop or a freezer with some type of oven on top. That mindset, I think, that really like feels like it's like ingrained in your team. Did you build that, or do you feel like they've always just had that mindset because they, maybe grew up working in restaurants?
I think we've all just really had that mindset on, like, again, efficient operations. How can we use the most space, to serve two different functions, and again, make it efficient for the employees as they're working through it. And there's so much innovation that's coming on. We definitely want to move forward or move towards more automated systems that takes the repetition out of it for the day to day for our employees, because nobody wants to just sit there and do the same thing. And if I can, have the robots, scooping rice or whatever that is at the point where it comes affordable for the masses, I mean, we will definitely embrace that. Obviously, we never get away from having employees, but the good thing about machines is, well, they tend to show up. Occasionally they break down, but they're there every
Yeah.
day. So that also helps, because the labor market is just so tough, and everybody in the industry just knows it's such a challenge.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like there's such a there are a lot of big feelings about automation in the restaurant industry, I feel like. And I think at the end of the day, if you ask pretty much any restaurant operator, do you feel like you're 100% fully staffed every single day? They're going to say no. And so it's like, including some of that automation and taking some of the strain off of your really great employees too that are showing up and doing an amazing job to make their job easier. Like, who doesn't want that? So it's trying to flip that script for people, because a lot of people, they when anything is new, there's feelings. So I get that
Yes,
for sure.
absolutely.
So you're currently looking at sort of a weird configuration space in Louisville and rethinking that whole setup. Walk us through maybe how you found that problem, and then how you kind of go through and make adjustments.
And so we have a franchisee who's going to open their first store in Louisville, hopefully yet before the end of the year. And the space is an odd configuration. So, we're looking at, like, well, how do we configure it? So again, learning from our past experiences, making sure that the staff has enough room to work, that we have enough space for the customers to sit who do want to come in and sit with us, and just making it visually appeasing to the customers and to the employees, and again, just efficient. So sometimes that's you know, the way we tuck the dish tank or a prep sink, or things like that. Or again, going back to, like, let me get a freezer that has a tabletop on top of it, so that way I can put my toaster oven on top of it, or I could do those different things that allows that piece to serve two purposes, and kind of reduce that, to increase the counter space versus reducing it by all my equipment and nowhere for it to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that efficiency is like your word of the day. I love it. Like, just driving efficiency in your design. It's super cool to hear how you guys go about making sure that your stores are as efficient as they can be. Another thing that I think that when we chatted, you really drove home was the idea of paying attention to your financials, and really blocking time for it. It seems like that's one of the most important things that you believe an operator can do. What does that feel? Why does that feel maybe like radical to say out loud in this industry?
I think it's because everyone's like, well, of course we look at our financials, but do you really look at your financials? And, when I go to different conferences and seminars, I'm always trying to learn more and learn, as they say, learn from someone smarter than you. There's always someone smarter than you, and, like, pick their brain and understand. And one of the sessions I was listening to this year at a conference, they were talking about just reviewing the P&Ls, and, like, not just reviewing it, but, like, going down deep into it. And gosh, one of the ladies was saying, they were getting credit card chargebacks that were, and I think she was actually a hospitality brand, a hotel, was $60 to $100,000 a year. Hello, that is a lot of money. And if you just look at, and it was lumped into her credit card fees, so it wasn't like sticking out. So it's like not only just looking at your broad categories, but really drilling down into the details of the why. Why are we paying $10 a week for this? $50 a week for that, or $100 a month, whatever it is. Look at every single thing, and do you need it? How do I, how do I reduce my costs as much as possible? And on our side as a franchisor, we do that for our franchisees, even though they may not think that or believe that, but we do. We're always, as again, everyone's coming to us. I have this great system. It'll automate this. It'll automate that. And it's only $50 a month, $200 a month, and that's just stacking up on my franchisees. And we just have to really be cognizant of that, and really look at, is this the best product for my franchisees? And sometimes we may think it is, and we as a franchisor may pick up part of the cost of that because we just believe in it that much, or we believe in it enough to give it a try because we think it's going to help the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. You told me that you look at food and labor costs weekly and then kind of track over a 12-week average. Walk us through that discipline. What are you looking for, and what does maybe like a bad week tell you?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, bad weeks scare me, especially, when I have a franchisee who's not necessarily looking at those bad weeks, but bad weeks turn into bad months and bad quarters and bad years. So, yes, we're always going to have something, happen, where maybe you have some kind of a environmental thing. You have a snowstorm, rainstorm, you have, all the Canadian wildfires that come through, whatever it happens, and it affects your business. And so you've either overordered, overstaffed, whatever the case may be. So yes, that is going to happen on a weekly basis at sometimes. But when you don't have a reason why that happened, or it starts happening on a regular basis, and you don't make adjustments, that's where that one bad week can turn into a bad month and snowball from there. So it's really paying attention to that. We look at labor hours, not just labor dollars, the food cost, and just, and we send those, we have a great IT team, and we've created some reports that we send out to our franchisees. So even if they're not looking, all they have to do is look at the weekly email we send, and they can just get a quick snapshot, on it. And with our POS system, we personally use it for all of our employees to clock in and clock out, because that way I get a fairly accurate representation of my labor costs there. And, I wish all my franchisees used it too for theirs. They don't, but we could help them more if they did. And that's what I tell them on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love that. Trying to give them the tools, getting people to adopt those, like, it can be tricky. You mentioned accountants and attorneys as some of the most important people an operator can spend money on. What does good advice actually look like, and how do you know when you're not getting it?
Well, a lot of times you don't know a lot of times you don't realize you're not getting good advice until it's too late. And I think that really is kind of, especially on the attorney side of it. And I always counsel my franchisees to have an attorney look at their lease. And, even though I look at it with experience, not as an attorney, but, with the experience, sometimes they don't look for a professional who is an attorney who specializes in real estate. And it's different. It's different than, the guy who's doing divorce, or the person who's doing even real estate title. They think that that's still the same correlation. It's really not. And understanding, every word in that lease is legally binding. So how do I make sure I'm protected? I'm protected if the landlord wants to raise my expenses in there because they want to charge a bigger management fee. I try to protect them from that, but that's where a good attorney can help them through that. And then, on the accounting side, just understanding your tax deductions, doing, tax planning, whether you're going to do accelerated depreciations, what you can include as a business expense, what you can't. And again, maybe I'll just roll into that as people are looking to like buy stores, because there's a lot of people who buy and sell their stores in different brands. It's really digging into the financials then too, because you want to understand, is there stuff that was left out? Like what was left out, or the things that were padded in, an owner's cell phone or an owner's vehicle, where your store manager you wouldn't necessarily pay for that, but just understanding what those real expenses are, and having a professional that really specializes in our field who can look at that and analyze. And again, knowing what's missing is as important as knowing what's there.
Yeah, that's great advice. The knowing what's missing that's probably jarring to people.
It is, because of what's not there, but it
Yeah,
needs. There's some things that really need to be there, and if they're not, that's where you get in trouble later.
yeah. So you are scaling. Hot Head Burritos is on the road to 100 plus units. So what does disciplined growth actually look like at this stage, and what does it feel like maybe to say no to a deal that you might think looks good on paper?
I think, as we have grown, what we have really come to understand, and as our brand has gotten larger and more sophisticated, for us, it's distribution. So, if someone, called me up and said, Kelly, I want to do a store in Denver, Colorado today, I would say, well, if you're not going to plan to do 3 to 5, I can't do it because my distribution is going to be painful. And we've kind of learned that, even though I have 6 stores in Florida, sometimes I have a little bit of an issue, getting things there, because it's all just based on volume and timing and those kind of things. So we understand that now, and that's why we're really focused on, I'll say, kind of connecting the dots between where we are now and and filling those areas in between. So we really pay attention to that now, and making sure that our franchisees who come in, that they're capitalized enough that yes, they can do that store. And like I said, I really want them to look at Hot Head as they should anything like a portfolio. So if you go in and you just do one, your exposure is big, not just for our brand, in any brand. But if you go in with the thought that I'm going to do 3, 5, 7, okay, then as I like to say, if there's road construction in front of your store for 6 months or a year, and you have 2 or 3 others, well, hopefully their volume can lift and hold the one that's going to be down for a little while. Those aren't things that are within our control. Now, adjusting and scaling labor and food, when those things happen, is very important, and just getting creative on how else going out into the community, delivering catering, whatever you need to do to keep those sales up, but really paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, I love your analogy about connecting the dots from where you guys are to where you can grow, because I think that's something that, even as a consumer, people will be like, oh, like I wish I had X restaurant chain around me. And, understanding the big picture of like, why it's like strategic maybe for some of these restaurant groups to scale in the certain markets that they are. Like you did open my eyes to that too, because I was like, wow, that's such a good point. Like if you have this one location that's on the opposite side of the country, it's extremely hard on your distribution. So that's really, really interesting. You said that one of the big lessons you got from your rapid fire days was to streamline the menu and not try to be everything to everybody. How'd that philosophy play out at Hot Head?
That the rapid fire, that quick serve pizza space is very competitive, and you just really, really have to have high volumes in order to move into product that you don't waste it. And so we really learned a lot now. And in the position I'm at, I'm really trying to hold my team back in some ways, where they have all these ideas, and there's all this new product that's coming at us, but we just really have to look at, can we execute it? Is it worth it? Are we going to move it? Is the customer going to buy it? Like we've looked at a couple different types of ways we could serve chicken or different desserts, but the cook time was so long. As a consumer, I'm not going to wait 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, because one, the employee has to stop, they have to go, make that product how it needs to be made, and stops the line. makes the other customers frustrated because it slows them down. And so we just really have to be able to execute quickly. There are things always that'll take a little bit, but I just really tried to focus on, eliminating those extra SKUs, trying to consolidate, trying to, make it easy for our franchisees, our customers, and our employees. That's the most important thing. And, for my franchisees, again, whatever product I bring in, I have to move it. They have to move it. Otherwise, they're going to throw it away. And that's not good business.
Yeah. No to the food waste.
No food waste.
No food waste. If a fast casual brand came to you today at 15 locations asking how to scale without breaking what made them good, what would be the first thing you'd tell them?
The first thing I think the first thing I would ask them is, okay, do you have an operations manual that's duplicatable? And as funny as that sounds, a lot of people really don't. Like, oh, okay, we make this sauce this way. Okay, it might have a recipe or two, but do you really have operations? And then, as I've learned just from experience and from, always seeking out additional knowledge, is, does this work in a different area? What works in Florida isn't necessarily going to work in Denver, Colorado, or somewhere cold versus somewhere hot, or the different, trends, healthier trends, where people in California where they tend to eat healthier than the people in the Midwest. It's like, is this going to matter? So understanding, does your brand scale out of your geographical area? And then, what's it take to build it? How flexible? What's the cost of entry in there? I like to tell my potential franchisees, I'm not a McDonald's where you have to build a building and just go in, that's what you have to do. We have flexibility. So does your layout and your brand have some flexibility that allows potential franchisees to get in, at a lesser cost? And then again, if I'm a 15 store brand, am I going to fund it myself or am I going to franchise? That's two totally different games that you're playing there, and the amount of capital that you need if you're not bringing in franchisees, then that's a whole different game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've loved this conversation. I think I want to steer a little bit into, leading as a female in the industry. So when you were coming up in commercial real estate and then in franchising, what did those rooms feel like? Was gender something that you thought about consciously, or did it not really come up as something that was maybe a barrier to entry?
Yeah, in the commercial real estate world, it definitely is. It definitely is a barrier, being a woman, and I just think, and then in the franchising world too, and honestly, being a woman in most industries, I think is probably fairly difficult. I've had a few in my day. The most important thing I think is education. Like, you just have to educate yourself, understand what's going on, always be learning. Because if you know what you're doing, it's kind of hard for them to put you down and fight back if you're out there trying to learn and educate yourself, and if you know your financials and your P&Ls, well, they can't tell you don't. So
Yeah.
but sometimes you just have to be tough and stand your ground. And again, as women, I think that's something that we're used to. And as women, it's like we juggle a lot. We have a lot of different things that we do in our lives. At different times where you might be having children, not having children, and then as they get older, now you have these parents that you have to take care of, and just things are always moving. But women are great multitaskers, so I think we can do anything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we can do anything. And I agree. I agree with the sentiment on good multitaskers for sure. So I coined that as a strength of mine. So maybe talk to me a little bit. Like, do you think the industry's changed at all since you entered it, or do you think it's trying to change in any way?
I think it is. I think there's a lot of good things happening in the industry. There's World Women in Restaurant Leadership. They're out there trying to, cheerlead for us and help bring women together and really, to really help women support women. Because sometimes we're not the best at that. It's probably because we're multitasking, or we're just trying to make it ourselves, and we can be competitive just like the guys. And so remembering that we're kind of all here together, and even though we may be competitors, we can still share best practices, without giving away without giving away trade secrets.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what do you make sure to tell the women, or what do you want to tell the women, I guess, coming up behind you now?
Oh, that they really can do anything that they want to do, and that they, again, you need to educate yourself. Do the best that you can. One of the things that we always we tell people on our team is that you have to train your replacement. And it sounds scary, like, oh my God, I'm training my replacement, but you can't move up if you don't have the person coming up behind you that makes it easy for your boss or your investor or whatever to know that, okay, I can take them up because they have their team coming up behind them, and to really understand that and not be threatened by that.
Yeah, I love that training your replacement, because it does sound like intimidating in the moment,
Yeah.
but it is just really about building the people that can then come and help support you. And I think if you can, be the leader to build those people up and train them up the way that they need to learn and grow in the industry, says a lot about your leadership style. So shouldn't be an intimidating thing, but rather positive for sure.
Yeah. And I think one more thing on, as far as women are concerned is, like, again, back to that, to having children. We had one of our supervisors who oversaw 4 of our stores. Some people call them district managers. We call them supervisors. And she was going to quit because she was pregnant. And she said, I'm not going to be able to do my job at this level, so I'm just going to have to quit. We're like, denied. No, we're not going to let you do that. Everybody on our management team had children. I was the only female, but it's like we'd all had children. We've been through this. We know what it's about. It's like there's going to be some hiccups, there's going to be some bumps, but it'll work itself out. Like, when I was in the financial business, my kids slept under my desk when they were sick at one point in time because I didn't have anybody else. Like, you just get through it, and that's the way it is. So
Yeah.
I just think that by being honest communications with your employers and just saying, hey, I've got this going on, and granted, as an employer, I need you there, but if you're good, we're going to work with you. If you're just a slacker, then then that's a whole different problem. But just communication is really the key in everything.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's, supporting the people that are so loyal and good to your business and your brand is gonna be a great thing. So I love to hear that you really lifted her up, because I'm sure it was a scary thing to have to admit too, of like, I'm not gonna be able to do this all. Like, I can't juggle it. And the fact that she was able to kind of bring that forward and then get the support from you, I'm sure meant a lot to her. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Well, you've been great. Tell me if there's anything that we didn't cover that you want to chat about as kind of closing remarks here.
Oh gosh, let me see. What would I share? I guess the one thing that I would share, that we probably haven't talked about, is just talking about partnerships. So a lot of times, if you're getting into the restaurant business and you're become a franchisee, it's hard to have enough capital to do it all yourself. So you get involved, or starting a brand or whatever you're doing. And so you get involved with partners. So partners are like marriages, I like to say. So you want to make really wise choices in what you're doing. But even, I think, more as important, if not more important, is that you need to have an operating agreement, and you need to spell out in your operating agreement who does what are the expectations. Because when the expectations are not clear cut and spelled out, that's where things become problematic. And feelings get hurt, lawsuits happen. So by just slowing down a minute and just spelling that all out, it's very important. And honestly, I think it's important on, even as a husband-wife team, if that's what you're doing. What's one person doing? What's the other person? Is one person doing front office? One person's doing the back office? What's happening? Just so we have some expectations. And then, maybe in the husband-wife situation, maybe you got to talk about that kid situation. Like, what happens with that? And who, are we going to pay someone to come in and do back office or whatever it is? But communication is the key, and just really thinking through your partnerships, and who's providing time, who's providing money, and just spelling that out, especially when it starts to become really profitable. or not, like how is the profits going to be handled? Is there a different distribution? Is there preferred stock payback for some of your investors? Whatever that might look like, but you just got to spell it out. And that kind of goes back to having the professionals, having the right attorney, and just, even though it seems like, oh my gosh, I'm spending thousands of dollars for this document, it is so worth it. Like, you do not want to, that is not where you want to keep out. Like, you need to spend the money there and really think about, like, the person, spend time with the people you're going to be working with, partnering with. Do you like them? Can you spend time with them? Do you have the same beliefs and same work ethic?
Yeah, no, that's so fair. I think that belief in work ethic piece is probably like you could drive that one into the ground, because the second you start working closely with people that, have a different, mentality around their work, I'm sure can create some road bumps.
Yes, yes. How much vacation time do you need? It's
Yeah.
like, one person takes, doesn't go away even a week a year, and the other person's like, oh, every couple of months I'm going away for, a week. Well, that's going to be some resentment. So again,
Yeah.
if you know it up front, hey, this is how I want to live my life, and we're going to address that out right now, then there's no real hard feelings on it because you've already talked about it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us and just providing all your expertise. I can't wait for Hot Head's 20-year, birthday next year. I think that's so exciting, and I can't wait to see everything you guys do. And, maybe we can reconnect and chat 20-year plans when you get there. And I'm just so excited for you guys.
Yeah, I would love that. Yes, thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Yes, awesome. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Brands and Banter.